Grace and peace, brothers and sisters throughout the Wisconsin Conference of the United Church of Christ. Thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Thank you for the leaders you may have sent to our annual meeting this weekend in Green Lake. And thank you above all for your continued gifts to our church's wider mission. Those gifts are important, indeed indispensable, in providing a ministry that all of our congregations and clergy benefit from. So, with deep appreciation, thank you. It was 32 years ago this summer that I was preparing to enroll in college as a freshman. I was set to go off to UWEC, the Eau Claire Blue Golds, a rather nondescript mascot for a very beautiful campus. Our motto, however, was compelling. Excellence, the goal. Just a month ago, Trin and I took our youngest child, Mariana, on some campus tours. Unlike her brothers, who were already in college and had no interest in looking at our alma mater, Mariana had some idea that nursing would be her calling, and that the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire might be the right place. And so we ventured there to our old stomping grounds, nestled along the banks of the Chippewa River, just down the road from world-famous Leinenkugel's Brewery. And would you know, we discovered, as of late, Eau Claire has a brand new motto. No, not summer shandy or canoe paddler. The power of and, A-N-D. That little conjunction junction, as you may remember from our childhood. The power of and. The power of and invites students to broaden their horizons and become multi-dimensional. It's a wonderful counterbalance from the motto of excellence. You dig into your discipline deeply and become an expert. The power of and invites all students at Eau Claire to engage in their passions, in music, in sports, in art, in clubs, in service, in politics, in volunteering, to chase their dreams and become well-rounded citizens. Well, on the tour, we began to ask people, students there on the campus, what's your and? And sure enough, they could tell us what it was. So I wonder to you this morning, along your daily grind, the toil of your week in, week out life, what is the power of your and? I play a little bit of piano when nobody is listening. Here is my premise for this morning. That the story of God's goodness and grace throughout all of history is a story of expanding possibilities, of widening welcome and inviting broadly, rather than a story of diminishing and a story of restricting and a story of excluding. The story of God's open-ended spirit, in the Hebrew ruach, suggests that she will blow where she will blow, creating possibilities. It's a both and permission-giving story, not an either or parameter-limiting story. Consider the biblical narrative, the creation stories, glorious depictions of unfolding abundant life. The liberation from Exodus, from Egypt, the people of God set free on a journey that was boundless. The redemption and the restoration from exile in Babylon. This was an invitation to unlimited reconciliation, and a sense that come what may in life, God's people have vested within them a powerful spirit of resilience. The life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus the Christ, an everlasting and ever-present promise that new things will come. And the Pentecost power, an uncontainable spirit of imagination, which begs the question, what could be? What is yet to come? Well, much has been said lately and written about the millennial generation, suggesting they aren't joiners of any organizations, and they're certainly not lovers of institutions. It may very well be true that this generation will be indifferent to an irrelevant church. But I believe they will engage passionately in activities that are purposeful and meaningful, and that feed their vision of how the world should be. I wonder if, in fact, millennials are helping the church to relinquish our either-or mindset. Either you're a member or you're not. Either you're a pledger or you're not. In favor of both and valuing. Understanding that all that is behind us in history and all that is beyond us in our future and all that is before us even now, all of that must be held in the great spiritual context of possibilities. We live in an ever-connected and blending world. Isn't it strange, though, how quickly we gravitate to our separateness? Our politics are dominated by either or, red or blue, conservative or progressive. We're desperate for the color purple. We're desperate for leaning in and finding common ground and both and ideas. Our foreign policy is friend or foe. They're either with us or they're against us. But in a complex world, such oversimplification seems downright silly. Our orientation to climate change, either we believe it and we live accordingly, or we don't and we live accordingly. Our orientation to open and affirming, either our congregation says yes or they say no. And to immigration, kick them out or welcome them in, chasing to our corners and proclaiming our polarization does not move humanity forward. And so this in and of itself is not enough. We must live in a both and world. How about both? Here is where I stand. Because the gospel of Jesus Christ and the plumb line of love tells me pretty clearly, even unequivocally, where I stand on these issues. And here is where we can make partnerships and work together with other like-minded folks to make changes in our world. Technology, it's neither all bad nor all good. It's both our frustrating nemesis and it's our fortunate blessing. For me, it's often my headache by morning and my delight by night. In many ways, God is calling us to be the church of both and, to embrace new dimensions and fresh expressions of Christ-inspired community, without the necessity of defensiveness or even the worries that we need not have, because all along we will hold true and fast to the essential truths of the Scriptures as we understand them. And all along we will be both and. Why would our default position be either or when we live in a both and world? We can hold fast to some of the practices and rituals that are beloved to us and explore some new frontiers at the same time. And so we learn to appreciate. Years ago, myself, I was confronted with that classic worship conundrum: contemporary band or traditional organ. And so I threw up my hands and said, why don't we get a grand piano? And then why don't we put it all together in a blend, a both and blend, and see how it comes out? You and I, we're learning to appreciate things about each other even when it isn't our first preference. And so we appreciate pews and movable chairs. We appreciate high church and weird church. We appreciate robes and jeans. We appreciate tall steeples and storefront communities. We appreciate organic gardening gatherings and dinner sacred conversations. We appreciate protest rallies and socially conscious investing. This is all church. Last fall, I was fortunate enough to participate in a denominational leadership institute hosted by Duke University, where we spent considerable time with this oxymoronic phrase called traditioned innovation. Traditioned innovation is the idea that we can only shape the innovative ideas of the future of the church for the 21st century once we fully honor and understand the values of our spiritual tradition. And so we both hold fast to the truths that make us uniquely the United Church of Christ: wide welcome, warm hospitality, justice seeking, radical love for all. And we then think creatively about exploring new structures and fresh forms for being the church. And that gives us permission to relinquish some of the relics in our history that even God says to us it's okay to let go of. What if we were to think of the church as both a noun, a beloved place, and a verb, a transformational experience? To understand that, yes, we must maintain our buildings and our budgets best we can, and we must never forget the biblical imperative. The biblical imperative to co-create a more loving, just, equitable, and generous world. Whatever that means in our ministry setting. So the Apostle Paul is often thought to be of an era where dualistic thinking was the way people understood. So heaven and hell, sinner and saint, spirit, flesh. Yet the Apostle Paul was nevertheless a very both and pioneer in the faith, shaped by his deep sensitivity to Jewish roots, he was also influenced by a wider Hellenistic culture and an appreciation for the Greco-Roman world. Indeed, he advanced the doctrine of justification by grace through faith. But he also then turned around and said that good deeds was the rightful expression of that faith. He was both an ecclesiastical resource, how to worship, the rituals by which we would live, and a congregational coach, how to get along. He may have been the first churchocrat without a whole lot of authority, which is a beautiful thing for the United Church of Christ, because it is the earliest expression for us of how to be both covenantally bound to one another and autonomously independent from one another, or as some would say, interdependent with each other. Paul's interest, as should ours be, was the unity of the church. He gave wide permission for Jewish Christians to maintain their rituals unless they became a stumbling block, and for Gentile Christians to be fully welcomed into Christendom without subscribing to the prerequisite sort of traditions that would make them legitimate for Christianity, so long as they weren't offensive to their Hebrew sisters and brothers. I dare say, friends, we could use a little bit of lean-in Pauline theology these days. Each of us comes from a congregation that cannot be pigeonholed in one fell swoop. We have complexities and different ideologies and people that lean in all directions in our churches. We no longer live in a simplistic world of categorization in which people are either, confessed believers or avowed atheists, in which within Christianity people are either Catholics or Protestants. In the same way, in an ever more complex world, we are living into a post-gender era, recognizing that many are either or, but some identify themselves as both and. And we are living in a time of post-religious labeling. Many young people say these days, don't put me in a box. I believe all sorts of things. And the beauty of this growing spiritual amalgamation is that diversity is all the more welcome, and conversation is all the more rich, and collaboration in advancing a kinder, more generous, and equitable world is all the more possible. So I'm going to close with these thoughts. It's taken the church a long time to come to grips with the reality that God blesses who God blesses and where God blesses, and that we on the inside neither own truth nor bask in privilege. Both the spiritual but not so religious and the dutifully and devoutly attending of church share in the sacred. So if we're going to continue asking the age-old question, when will all those heathens out there return to the church? We better darn well be asking, when will this sometimes overly sanctimonious soul take to the streets to find partners at the intersections of church and culture, where authentic community can be built, where real lives are changed, where love is tangibly demonstrated, and where there is no longer this assumption that the Great Commission is about acquiring people and gathering in pledges. It's about the embodiment of Christ. It's about the demonstration of Jesus. It's about living with love and compassion in partnership. I've been talking a lot about the cross these days, as a preacher is wont to do. But I've been talking about the cross as a symbol for the way forward in church. I've been talking about it as a vertical and horizontal beam that symbolize different things. The vertical beam symbolizing in some ways the institution of the church, praying at the feet of Jesus and building the church that we are so beloved of. And even steeples that reach up into the heavens, and all that is well and good, because the spiritual journey that we're on needs to be tended to. And yet there is this horizontal crossbeam that speaks of the justice movements of society, that speaks of social witness. And I wonder to you, if our calling in this 21st century is to try to stretch from the heart of Jesus to the hands of Jesus out and reach around this world in partnership with all who will meet us at those precious intersections where lives can be transformed. And that brings me all the way back to the power of "and." I wonder, for your congregation, what is your special "and"? For some, it's providing medical equipment to an entire community free of charge. For some, it's offering a community meal where people of all stripes come and gather together. For some, it's a clothing closet, a necessity, particularly for the poor. For some, it's the resettling of a refugee family. What is the "and" of your congregation? Let us together, friends, continue to do justice. Let us together continue to love kindness. Let us together continue to walk humbly, discovering the power of our "and," shifting boldly to the places of God's new calling. Let us be the church, faithful and of strong witness. Alleluia. Amen.